Go.
Welcome to the PRCA Fuse podcast for the stories behind great PR, marketing, and people with a passion for communications. Hosted by myself, Farzana Baduel, speaking every fortnight to trailblazers in and around our industry. Our special guest today is Mark Madsen. Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, a little bit about Mark. Mark is one of the best known mergers and acquisition specialists in the UK PR and public affairs industry. In tandem with his business partners, he's made over 86 successful business introductions ranging in size from large international consultancies down to very small specialist consultancies with only 2 or 3 staff employed. Now, the variety of deals that he has brought together has given him this unique insight on how our industry operates with regards to structuring, exit planning, and valuations. And as a result, he has delivered on a wide variety of transactions. Now, prior to this, he served in the army and having been commissioned into the Grenadier Guards. Welcome again.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now, Mark, I know that there's a lot of listeners that run agencies or are thinking of setting up agencies, and they're going to really enjoy this conversation that we're about to have that unique insight from yourselves. Now, first of all, before we get started, I want to know a little bit about you. I wanted to know what a typical work day in the life of Mark Madsen looks like.
Good grief. There is no typical workday at all. Every day is different. I'm involved in a number of different interests, which keep me going during the day. I'm a great believer in staying in touch with what's happening really in the world. And I wake every morning to the BBC News. I go to sleep to the BBC News. And I spend all day checking up on exactly what is happening around the world. And I think it's very useful attribute to be aware of what is going on in our world.
Absolutely. I love the BBC personally as well. And now I also wanted to know a little bit about what drives you. If you look at your career from the army to M&A in the PR world, what would you say is your overarching career mission? What fuels you? What's your propellant?
Well, when I came out of the army, coming out of a guards regiment, you sort of head towards the city and, all of that. And frankly, I went and had a look at them all and was interviewed by various people and all the rest of it. And I really didn't like what I saw at all. And I was rather lucky in that I met this quite stunning American lady who had a recruitment business in London with about 40 odd people. And she was so motivational, unbelievable. And I joined her on absolutely nothing at all, pennies. And in fact, I don't think I was even on the payroll. I was being paid out of petty cash. Anyway, within a year, I was running her business for her in London. Not because I was great, simply the other people around me weren't that good. And she then opened up in America and in the Middle East, and unfortunately lost a lot of money, and we stopped. I was then very lucky to meet a gentleman who was about 25 years older than me, who had been an asset stripper. And he was a chartered accountant and was very wealthy, and he wanted to come back into business. But he was absolutely appalling with people, and I was actually quite good with people. And so we got together and we formed a group looking for people to back. And we built an audiovisual production business that became an ad agency. We built a conference company, a model agency. We developed a number of recruitment agencies, secretarial recruitment agency, which I loved, an accountancy recruitment agency. And we built those up and then eventually sold them. And that really gave me the experience of building and indeed selling service sector businesses. And it was from there, when he retired and I was thinking about what I was going to do from then, that a friend in PR rang me and said, "Look, Mark, could you help me sell my company?" And I did. And then the phone just kept ringing.
And Mark, I was intrigued to know your time in the British Army. Were some of those skills and experience that you had transferable to running a business?
Well, I don't know. I think the British Army, more than anything else, gave me self confidence. It gave me aggression. In other words, really the ability just to go in and ask the question, which when you are selling a company to a large platform with heavyweight advisors, you've got to be prepared to be quite forceful yourself for your client in order to get them to an acceptable deal. So it was really confidence and aggression that I learnt, as well as how to, frankly, lead people. My guardsmen I loved, were just
And,
fantastic.
and forgive me for my ignorance. Grenadier Guards, what does that mean exactly?
What does it mean?
Yeah, I've heard of Grenadier Guards,
The
but
Grenadiers
I'm not
are
familiar.
the finest regiment in the British Army. They are an infantry regiment. We serve with them. I served in Hong Kong, Brunei, Cyprus, Northern Ireland, Chelsea, all over the world, and had a wonderful time.
And what made you decide to join?
What made me leave?
I didn't know what made you decide to join in the first place.
Well, I didn't fancy going to university. I was appalling, really. I was always a bit of an individual, and I literally left school at 18, and I was commissioned at 19, and straight out to Hong Kong, up on the border with China, collecting refugees who were swimming ashore there, and I had a great time.
Gosh, and so how many years did you serve?
I was in that for about 5 years altogether.
And I think it's extraordinary the experience and the exposure that you had in such an early stage of your life, traveling to so many different countries. Was it difficult after such an exciting and experience and traveling and meeting lots of people from different cultures? Was it quite difficult to settle into the private sector? That transition.
Well, I think I replaced that by fairly quickly working for myself. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the service sector, and the people in it, the entrepreneurial people in it who were leading whatever it was, whether it was recruitment consultancies or PR consultancies or whatever. And I found a real affinity, if you like, with them, and that helped me to sort of grow and enjoy.
And so from the army, you had this incredible experience at the Diversified Services Group, and then you went on and founded Madsen Advisory. And when you set it up, were you nervous of only just focusing in the communications industry? Did you feel it would be a little bit too niche, or did you have faith that the industry would grow at the rate that it has?
Um, I really didn't know. I mean, who does? We start things and we hope to hell that it's going to work and all the rest of it. Frankly, I slipped into it slowly by helping that particular agency. And then it slowly grew from there. I helped a number of people who were looking to gain equity within agencies. And from there, I started to work with small companies and looking at how we could do a deal with a larger company whereby they got equity for their share. And then it developed into selling more mainstream agencies.
And you mentioned to me earlier that you like service sector people, the people working in the industry. Why? Is it because we're a bunch of people pleasers? And what is it about the people in the service sector, and particularly public relations, that you have this affinity with?
I think that it's just because they're enthusiastic in the main, absolutely enthusiastic about what they do. Also, they're working, a lot of them are working at the forefront of industries, advising the chief executives and the boards and all the rest of it. The people in the public affairs arena are very much at the heart of government, really, and working with them. The people, working in strategic PR, or indeed now more and more in the sort of digital social media space. Everything is developing really so fast, and it's exciting. So I love it.
So you really backed the right horse, because when you started early on, PR was perceived as the sort of poor cousins of advertising. And we were very much sort of limited by the sort of media relations events, highly tactical, didn't have the ear of the CEO. What do you think changed that propelled PR into a new realm in terms of influence and expanding their remit?
I absolutely, Farzana. I just, it amazes me when I see how the advertising industry, and I had many friends in it, were the sort of gods in the whole marketing space, and they looked down upon the entire PR industry as being press relations and nothing at all, really. Well, frankly, it has been such a pleasure to see this sort of industry emerge like a chrysalis, just growing and growing and growing. And as they spread their offer from press relations into all the other areas, whether it be SEO or digital or indeed even more strategic advisory, advice and all the rest of it. We've seen them really take over from what is now a struggling advertising industry. The gods of advertising are just weeping when they see how the marcomms industry has really grown. And on the back of that, of course, the M&A market has taken off. With deals sort of multiplying around the world and across sectors. It's sort of all been about firms seeing the access that the industry now has at board level. And isn't it extraordinary how we have now seen firms outside of the atypical buyers in the industry? You've seen firms in the legal sector starting communications arms. You've seen firms in the consulting sector. The other day, we saw Accenture buy Unlimited Group. They were a 60 odd million income, three company brand with Health Unlimited, Nelson Bostock, and Fever. All good brands. I sold a crisis and issues brand, 5 million income one called Register Larkin to Deloitte's. And it's this broadening. I was talking with a influencer brand. They had quite heavy sports. And one of the people who were interested in them was a quoted esports retailer. So the opportunity for the marcomms industry has really, in terms of M&A, has really exploded as this chrysalis has just grown and grown and flowered so beautifully.
So, Mark, you mentioned that there are other sort of professions swimming in our lanes. You've had law firms like Schillings, and and you mentioned Accenture. Do you think that the PR industry should be worried that it hasn't quite defined its parameters. People are often confused in terms of what public relations is. Is it, some people feel it's synonymous to media relations, other people don't like using the word public relations, they prefer using the word strategic communications. There's an overlap obviously between marcomms and the consumer side of PR. Do you feel that we haven't done a good enough job as an industry to articulate what the defining parameters are of our profession, and that has lent itself to other professional service firms coming in and branching out into the strategic aspects of the work that we do?
No, not really. I mean, I think that we're riding a wave, and the wave is fierce. We are coming up with the whole AI issues and the changes that that is going to have on the industry generally are massive. I think there's going to be a replacement in many respects of the sort of junior administrative staffing within agencies, which will mean there'll be a change in the balance of what the client base is prepared to pay, and yet we still might make a bigger margin. So I think that uh, it's too early to be sort of pedantic about, oh, we should protect this or protect that or whatever. I think we should just ride the wave and see where it's taking us, because it's taking us very fast.
I agree. I think it's a really exciting time to be in the industry. You mentioned earlier to me that agencies, they're not bought in the typical way, always just focusing on turnover and margin. They also can be valued in terms of the access that they bring. And you mentioned earlier that PRs are increasingly having access to the C suite. And so when you're asked to look for agencies to acquire on behalf of your clients, is that increasingly an aspect that they look at? That is not just the revenue and the margins. What are the sort of the typical areas that, other than the straightforward financials, that your clients are often interested in, the additional factors?
Right. Okay. So, firstly, my clients are actually the sellers. I don't work for buyers. Um, I find working for sellers much better, and one has better control, obviously, of the entire process. Um, the buyers are looking, yes, they look for turnover and they look for profit, but they do look for access. They look at the client base, and what they're interested to see is what sort of connections the firm has in terms of um, the uh, the decency or the size of the clients that they're handling within the particular sectors that are relevant to them. Um, and it is all about those relationships that people have, and which they have that slice of the marketing spend. And it's then the buying platform, frankly, seeing whether or not with their New York office or their influencer speciality or with whatever it is, they can increase that. And also, of course, they're looking the other way to see whether or not the people they're acquiring, can help them to grow theirs. And that, of course, is how you make a deal, make one and one, make two and a half.
And do you find that the sellers, they often come to you, or is it more a case where you approach agencies and say, have you considered that you could be an attractive proposition for an acquisition?
No, I mean, I get approached all the time. I put out a monthly mailer, it goes to 1,100 odd agency heads every month. It's all about acquisitions and results, and frankly, anything I think's of interest. Normally, I cut out the chairman's waffle off the end of it and just sort of keep it fairly tight. Um, and that generates, that just reminds people to think about it. And I drop people a line to say hi and how you're doing. And if you want to chat, I'm very happy to chat. I think that this whole process, it's firstly selling an agency is not a quick process. It will take 9 months, a year to sell a business. And really, in terms of preparing to sell, you've got to be looking at maybe 2 years out, maybe 3 years out sometimes. The first question that one has to ask oneself when you're looking to sell an agency is how much, it's the most basic question, how much money do I want? How much will make me happy to give up this control of this lovely agency that I have built, or myself and my colleagues here have built? And then the question is, well, will it earn that amount of money? And if not, what do we have to do to get there? And that can be 2 to 3 years out. So, I'm talking to people who are ready to sell, who are not ready to sell, who need to, frankly, think about selling in another way.
I think there's recently been quite an increase in management buyouts that we've seen in the sector. What I wanted to ask is, if somebody's thinking of selling their agency, how early should they approach you? You mentioned a timeline of around 2 to 3 years. Would you say that is a sort of timeline that they should be thinking about before they approach you?
Yes, absolutely. Because, leading up to a sale, you need to prepare your agency. You need to think about the mezzanine layer staff. So you've got in good people who could replace you in the event that you unfortunately fell ill or whatever, all of which giving confidence to a buying platform. You've got to think about those clients that you want to be dealing with. In other words, don't deal with loads of small little clients. Try and just concentrate on a couple of big ones, because they are the reason that people will buy you. So there's, and of course, one's got to be looking at how you present your accounts and all the rest of it. Every penny saved is worth whatever multiple you get. That penny is therefore worth 4, 5, 6, 7 times that 1 pence. So there's a lot of thought, and quite often, we talk about organic growth. Well, you need to go from $1.5 million income to 2 million with 20%, making say 400,000. You might be able to sell that 4, 5 times multiple. Well, to grow a business by £500,000 organic growth is hard. I meet people all the time. They say, "Oh yes, well, Mark, I'm going to grow next year to X or Y or whatever," and I'm sitting there thinking, well, we'll see. And quite often for people who want to get to a specific sum, they've got to think about it in another way. And another way can be that they actually place themselves onto somebody else's platform and strike a deal whereby they can share in the multiple, the bigger multiple, the 8 times, 7, 8 times multiple that the bigger agency will get when they go for a sale.
Over the years, Mark, you've obviously seen agencies in their quest to sell. Have you noticed any particular drivers that lead to success? That because you've probably come across so many agencies that says, well, right, my intention is to grow by X amount and have X amount margin, and you've come across agencies that achieve it and others that don't. Have you noticed any sort of cluster of similarities of the successful agencies that you can share with our listeners that really drive success of agencies in terms of the saleability of the agency down the line? So you mentioned having a really strong sort of, mezzanine management, so that if the principals are not able to continue working, they've adopted a key man risk by investing in the next layer of talent. So you mentioned that as one example.
Yeah.
Obviously, ensuring that there is year-to-year growth and protecting the margins. But anything else that you notice in agencies that are successful?
I mean, one does need to have an impassioned leader. There's no doubt about it. And what's quite interesting about those impassioned leaders is they go shooting up, growing their agency, and then at some point they start to hit a glass ceiling. And quite often, that glass ceiling is a limitation to growth because they can see the business coming in at the next level up and are quite capable of handling it, but are not able to pitch for it because of perception by the client for the need of critical mass. That's one thing. Second thing is, quite often you see these successful people who have got up to a certain stage and they're having to run their business and they are not enjoying that aspect of it at all. You know, the sort of management of the human resources side, of the financial side, etc., etc. And actually what they're good at and great at is really marketing communication programs with clients and conceiving things and building and all the rest of it. And so their growth is stopped as a result. So we then are looking at opportunities to place the business onto a platform which removes all of those administrative type functions and allows them perhaps more of an international role or whatever, something that's going to really stimulate the people going forward. I love it. I sold a company once. I can't tell you who they are, but it was to one of the sizable agencies, mid-size agencies, and they wanted to sell for cash. And halfway through the discussions on the deal, they rang me up and said, "Mark, actually, we love what these people are doing. Can you please change the deal? So yes, we get some cash, but we want to get into them. We want equity. We want to be part of it." And this is what I love about the industry. It is full of people who do what they do because they love it. And that is so important to make successful business, you know.
I wanted to ask a little bit about what the buyers look like. You have obviously international buyers, the Americans, for instance. I wanted to know your focus. Is it primarily UK agencies?
No, I'm currently selling an agency in Boston. I'm out to Singapore shortly. I'll be going around to have a look at some of the agencies there. I work in the Middle East. But although I represent sellers, I talk to the buyers all the time. The buyers can be broken, my market can be broken into five. One is, as you say, the Americans. I mean, God bless them. They love us. You know,
Why?
they love us because we, like they, have a sophisticated communications market. B, by and large, we speak the same language, you know, which if you're going to make an investment is a safer investment. And C, really because we're seen as a really good stepping stone to Europe. If you're going to make an investment in Europe, make it in London first and then make the step across. Of course, their economy is doing really well at the moment. And so there are loads of agencies over there looking to buy here. The second big market is really obviously the private equity market. Years ago, the private equity market would look down their noses at the PR marcomms, even the advertising industry, you know. And unless you were making 5 to 10 million profit, they wouldn't give you the time of day. Well, of course, they have all found so many more investors coming in now into their businesses. They are desperate to find good access for their money. And as our industry has improved immeasurably over the last 5 years or so, where our margins have come better. I mean, I've spoken with some agencies, they're making 40 to 50% margin. Um, Extraordinary. And of course, they are talking at board levels. So it makes them that much more interesting for the private equity. And we've seen from the very largest ones like Teneo and people like that, the sort of investment going on. And the private equity market invests and they want growth. Organic growth is tough. Acquisitive growth is easier. So I love them, needless to say. But anyway, there we are. So they are the third area is that left of field sector that with the Accentures and the other firms getting involved, who feel that their service sector offering would be enhanced by having a communications brand in it as well. And I think that's a real growth area, actually, real growth area for the industry. The fourth area is really the big firms, the Edelmans and the Fleischmans and the like. Great. You want to open in 29 countries around the world? Fantastic. They're the boys to go to. But here, like with your company, they come up against owner-managed, impassioned people, probably over-servicing their clients furiously. Their clients love them, and so the big firms are struggling really against them locally, and so they ring up and go, oh, have you got a specialist business in this area or that area we could enhance our offer with? And then the fifth area really is, it's all in about those companies in that 2-3 years before sale who are thinking about what they want to do. And yeah, they might sell, they might merge, they might bring somebody onto their platform, and all this. And there's a lot goes on in that whole area.
So when you speak to the buyers, do you often see that there is more of a bias towards perhaps the corporate comms side versus consumer? Is it a bias towards more sort of strategic comms rather than sort of the tactical side? And also the other question I wanted to ask is the whole debate of an agency that's sort of generalist rather than specialists.
Yeah, they are definitely interested in specialism if they can. So, healthcare, technology, the corporate area definitely is of interest, and within that, financial and the like, public affairs. Yeah, the broader consumer agencies are of interest where their client base are significant brands. Then they become of interest because the buying platform is thinking, what else can I sell into them based on your relationships? The ones that are struggling are those which have, frankly, a smaller margin, fashion as an area or that sort of thing. But there are in the consumer area, there are some great companies, some great travel related businesses as one area. So it is about the brands that you handle. I keep coming back to that. Definitely that is of interest. Then allied with that, it's about the margin that you can offer. So, really, if you can be offering 20% plus, ideally 25%, then you become much more attractive.
And the other thing I wanted to ask is, do you feel that there's a lot of agencies out there that actually wind down their agency because they've never actually thought that their agency has the potential to be acquired. That, the thought is, it's a little bit like running the bath, opening the taps with the plug out. You've got staff coming in and out of the agency, clients coming in and out of the agency, and they sort of think, well, what am I actually selling? Is it actually, is there an appetite for it? Are we too small to sell? So do you feel that there is a number of agency heads that run their agency, and when they think about retiring, they just gently let it sort of wind down, and they should actually be thinking about the possibility of selling it? Because there is when I speak to other agency owners, they're like, oh, well, I love what I do, and and I've got to start thinking about retirement, and of course I can't sell it because who would buy it? Do you feel that that is an unfair assessment that some agency heads have of their own businesses, or do you think actually people generally know that?
No, I do. I see it. I sold a B2B agency run by a very nice chap. He must have been in his 60s, I would say, and he had a reasonable agency of about 1 million income. And it was making a profit, but not a great profit. It was just making him enough to live reasonably comfortably, and all the rest of it. And he wanted to sell it. He was thinking, I've got to really retire. It was unsaleable, absolutely unsaleable. And in the end, I managed to find 2 brilliant young women who had started an agency, and they were just going gangbusters. They had a delightful, crazy name, which was fun, and all the rest of it as a brand. And I worked on them, persuaded them, and we managed to do a deal where we gradually took over that business and bought out the older gentleman, and the businesses, they added £1 million to their £1 million business, and suddenly they had critical mass and were going gangbusters. So that was fun. But I do see businesses that have been going too long and actually need to make a change. I'm a great believer, and always have been, in the 3 to 5 year cycle of life. Everything we do happens in 3 to 5 years. Whether we start a job, start a company, start a relationship, we go shooting up, throwing off all the drive, enthusiasm, etc. I've been married, by the way, for 40 odd years, so just saying. But we go shooting up, and somewhere between year 3 and 5, we go into like glide mode, where we have to reassess that job, that company, that relationship. And we have to invest. If we want to carry on, we have to invest in it to drive it up again. And the difference for us between when we were 30 to when we were 35, 35 to 40, 40 to 45, in terms of our ability, our knowledge, our contacts, and all the rest of it, it all changes on each platform as you go up. And I think it's really important to, have these points in your business life where you actually stop and you think about where you are, where you're going, and do you need to make a change?
Do you mentioned something really interesting about the sort of 3 to 5 years, and I also, and it made me think about sort of timeframes. And you mentioned earlier that the valuation of businesses are often the clients, the team that they have. Over the years, the tenure of a client has reduced over time. So you have a lot more projects rather than annual retainers that sort of keep going. You also, on the other hand, in terms of talent, the average time that they spend at an agency is also reducing, sort of over the last 20 years. So with this reduction in terms of client contracts, in terms of the duration, as well as the reduction of the average tenure of talent, does that undermine the value of an agency with these underlying trends? Because when people are buying clients, by the time the paperwork has all been done, that particular client they had an interest in, the contract's over and they've put it out to tender and the existing agency didn't win it.
Yeah, it. I mean, the whole buying model has changed or developed, if you like, and in the past, people would look at an average profit on the last, say, 3 years of a business. Today, they look at the profit this year, and they'll buy you on the basis of this year, but they want the forecast for next year, which is, if you like, the earnout percentage of their deal. So, in terms of the clients and those what you talk about there, I would say that it is not um so much of an issue because they are looking at the capability of the players to be in that market, to have clients like they've got at the moment, and to replace those clients as and when they go. I mean, we saw it. I'm currently completing a deal at the moment where, halfway through the negotiations, a significant client, resigned. Thankfully, the people in the company are perfectly capable and have already proven that they can replace that client.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, what about when things go wrong? I mean, I have friends who sold their agency, were acquired by another agency in another country, and it was a disaster. The cultures didn't mesh properly. They had an initial honeymoon period. So, what have you seen that actually goes wrong? And obviously, you've worked on over 86 transactions. So, you also are in a great position to guide agencies. So, the focus isn't just on the deal, but what happens afterwards.
Totally, absolutely, totally. I mean, the it is so important to do it properly. There's nothing I hate more than getting rung up by somebody who says, "Mark, I've just been approached by so and so. They're offering this. What do you think?" I'm going, "Well, what do you think? If you want to take it, take it." Personally, when one has built one's own company up, you need to be able to sit in a couple of years' time and look back and know that A, you looked at the entire market, B, that you got the best price you could, a fair price, if you like, for the business. And by looking at the whole market, you can you can get a number of offers. So you can see, I mean, I can always tell somebody what their business I think is worth from my experience, but it's really when the market tells you that you actually know. So you need to get the right price, a fair price for your business. You need to get the right platform, which means that you are that you're happy to work with these people over the earnout, the 3-year earnout, and they stimulate you intellectually during that process. 3, your staff need to be happy. I mean, frankly, they need to be happy in order for the earnout to work. But they need to be happy and they need to be stimulated. A lot of staff are very happy with their businesses being sold onto bigger platforms because their careers can develop further as a result. And finally, your clients have got to be really happy with the platform that you have sold onto. So they are all getting, if you like, more than they got before. They've still got that impassioned you who are working away furiously on their account, but they've got more services, more ability, and they've got the ability, if you like, to brag yes, we are now with so and so international or whatever it is, um, which every client will brag about. But yeah, so I, I do just believe if you're going to sell, then for goodness sake, do it properly. I think that's what it comes down to.
So, Mark, you mentioned that you have a very global approach to representing your clients, the agencies, and you have an international network of global buyers. And you mentioned Americans being very interested in British PR firms. It gives them a foothold in order for them to then go into the continent, into Europe. I also want to know about other regions, such as the Middle East. And I myself, even on my LinkedIn 10 years ago, I started seeing so many PRs moving out to Dubai and then to Doha, and now it's happening in Riyadh. So I wanted to ask you, do you also see an appetite in the Middle East as well? Because all I see on my LinkedIn is PR professionals going to work out there, either agency side or client side. So I was just interested if there is also an appetite from the Middle East to acquire, and also an appetite for Western firms to have a Middle East foothold with an agency there.
Absolutely, and this has been a really growth area in the last couple of years. I mean, firms have been opening offices in Dubai and the various other sort of principal parts out there for a while, but really what we have now seen is the growth, particularly in Saudi Arabia, which has become one of the leading economies in the world. I'm currently representing a buyer who is looking to set up a London office, their first office outside of Saudi Arabia, which is really interesting. So yes, it has become, the whole industry as it's developed has become so much more interesting for international firms, and the opportunities now are much greater. Um, I'm, as I say, out in Singapore next month, and I think that is another tremendous business centre, which is really growing rapidly in terms of the Far East market, as the Hong Kong market has sort of declined somewhat. So Middle East, yep. Far East, Singapore, yep. And America, yep. All good areas.
Great. And did you notice any sort of decline in interest from the Americans post Brexit?
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, during COVID and all the rest of it, everything obviously really died. In fact, I had almost an entire year with virtually nothing happening at all. But post Brexit, no, as I said earlier, they still see us really as a stepping stone to Europe. And so the more we can encourage that, the better.
Great. Now, that leads me to the quick fire round of questions.
Good God.
So, Mark, who is the communicator that you admire the most, past or present?
I can tell you that straight away because he's a great mate of mine. He's a chap called Will Whitehorn, who was Richard Branson's head of communications. And since then, he's moved on and gone. I think he was at Scottish Exhibitions as chair there, and he's currently deeply involved in the space community of one sort or another. But it was classic. I remember when Virgin had that awful crash of one of their space shuttles, I think it was. What did Branson do? He rang up Will and said, Will, I need help. Come, help me. And, he is probably one of the most intelligent individuals I know. So I follow him with just admiration. I think he's great.
I'm going to definitely look him up. He sounds fascinating. Now, what about thinkers? Any particular authors, podcast hosts, poets, philosophers? What sort of, what sort of thinking has really impacted the approach that you take to life?
Oh, I'd love to give you the name of some wonderful sort of Japanese or Chinese sort of um, individual, but
The
I can't.
Greeks would
To
suffice as
be
well.
frank, I I'm just driven by I'm driven by my family. My father, who was Danish, fought in the resistance in the war and is featured now in the National Resistance Museum in Copenhagen, and then came to this country with nothing, and rose to be brigadier within specialist arm of the British Army. And he always inspired me to. He was a fairly tough individual, and I think he only loved his wife, sorry, his wife and his two sons, and that was it. Um, so I've always been rather driven and not led by individuals per se.
Well, it sounds like you've had the most incredible role model. And
Yes,
the,
indeed.
the other question I wanted to ask is what career advice would you give your younger self? So imagine giving advice to Mark Madsen, who's just left the British Army and is just about to embark upon his career in the private sector. What advice would you have given him?
It's well, that's a good question. It's the same advice I give on occasion to the sons of my friends and daughters of my friends. And that is, do work in a sector that you love what they do. Because it doesn't matter if you're the post boy or post girl, the firm will recognize your enthusiasm and your commitment. And when it comes to promotion and all the rest of it, they will not, they will look outside, but they will know that they have got little Mary or little Johnny or whatever it is, who is actually really enthusiastic and committed. And we know them, we can trust them. And, I saw it with my second son, who was a great sportsman and loved sport and didn't want to do anything else really. And I helped him into a major rugby club in the marketing department, and then he went. Then we moved him into a major football club, and he worked for many years for one of the leading names in the football industry. And I think it's that again goes back to that passion about what you do, and so that is the important thing. Once you've got that and can enjoy the industry, then you do well.
I love that advice. So follow your enthusiasm.
Yeah, totally.
Now, you're surrounded by sharks.
Yes.
Thank God this is a virtual meeting and I'm not there in person. I wanted to ask mental health and well-being. Obviously, you don't work in agency, but you work in agency land. And mental health is one of the key areas that PRs find themselves struggling with. I think it's in sort of top five most stressful professions in the world in various surveys. What do you do to keep yourself sane? Because actually M&A can be very stressful. You could work incredibly hard and you don't know if the deal's going to go off or not. You're bringing two people together in a way it's sort of, it can be conflict resolution, which in itself is quite stressful, in constructing the deal and ensuring that both parties are happy and collaborate. What helps you?
I, I think outside enthusiasms are really so important. It's always lovely when I'm sort of selling a company and I talk to people about their lives and what they're doing and what's motivating them and all the rest of it. And so many people in the marketing communications industry have outside interests, which I think is marvelous because it just builds the whole person. I mean, my personal interest is, yes, sharks. Spend my life diving. Thankfully, my wife dives as well, although she's sometimes known as prey. um, but this year I've been diving off Kenya, just come back from diving off Cyprus. And while I'm in Singapore, I shall be going north into Malaysia to go diving there. And I lecture on occasion on sharks. It is a real passion that sort of came from being a boy in Australia and loving it. So I think it's really important to develop your outside passions.
I'm terrified of sharks after watching Jaws. Do you think Jaws was a huge disservice to the reputation of the shark community?
It did more damage to sharks. I'm involved with an NGO in the States called Beneath the Waves that does marine conservation in the Caribbean, particularly with regards to the predator chain. One of the things you learn in life is it's really important not to damage, to remove parts of a predator chain, because the predator chain keeps everything healthy and fit. And if you take out a significant predator, then you just get a growth of too many of one particular species that's perhaps eating a particular type of coral or whatever, which is then damaging the coral and etc. etc. So it caused immense problems for the shark industry. People didn't care about killing them. They lost so many, let alone shark fin soup. Let's not go there with our friends from China and the like, which is ghastly, really, and has done so much damage.
Last question. What is it about sharks that fascinate you?
They have been going since time eternal, almost unchanged. Um, and uh, and of course, you've got the old sharks. This is actually a tooth from one of the biggest mega sharks.
Wow.
Yeah. So you didn't expect to have that on this program.
No, I didn't. And I've never met a shark enthusiast before.
Yeah.
Um, Mark, thank you so much
You're
for your
welcome.
insight. I know a lot of value, in your conversation for the listeners who are thinking about selling their agency. Now, how would you advise them to reach out to you? Via email, via LinkedIn? I know that you also have this email where you give like an update on what's happening in the industry. I've subscribed to it. I find it incredibly useful to know what's happening in the market. What would you advise listeners who want to get in contact with
Just
you?
email me, and I'm very happy to give lots of my time, frankly, just to have a chat and to see where people are and to perhaps suggest when they might look, what they might think about in terms of preparing for that look, um, and really, what the sort of values are of their business today, and therefore, have they got it to where they want it in terms of valuation, or do they need to grow it? And what are the options? How do they go from there? So yeah, just reach out, email. It's great.
Brilliant. And so that's a wrap of this episode of the PRCA Fuse podcast. Remember to subscribe and follow us on social. The link is below. Join us next time as we continue to explore the dynamic world of global communications. Huge thank you to you, Mark. Thank you.
You're welcome.